What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoners Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk to you about 14.20 going live to a server near you in about 1 week's time. It is Wednesday evening, so we have hit branch cut. It is entirely possible that we need to stabilize some changes. We can make further changes on Thursday and Friday. To be clear, it is rather unlikely, so the PBE scrape that you might see tomorrow is probably going to be what goes into the patch, unless we discover something weird has happened. But let's talk about what's going into fetch 14.20, a couple of teases of what's in 14.21. Topics that we're going to talk about in this video is where we are now after a big systems update in Split 3 with nerfing all the items in the game. Some of the things we're planning on doing in 0.21 now that we actually have data to collect, and we've at least had enough information of what the game actually feels like. Are there any other broad changes to talk about? We'll bring that up. In the short term, though, with the few days we did have to both react what the game is like and then also implement changes that are useful, we have some updates to AD systems and AP systems, some other miscellaneous balance to other stuff, and miscellaneous balance to champions, because unsurprisingly, there are some pretty big balance outliers when you change systems up in a really big way. So where we're at right now, I'm going to go through these in order. Game time is at a pretty normal state. For the last 2 years, roughly, or more, the average game of League of Legends has been between 28 and 29 minutes. We're closer to 29 right now, unsurprisingly, when you have games snowball less strongly. Games don't end as quickly, unsurprisingly. On a similar note, when games don't snowball as hard, we have data on how hard games snowball. Fewer games are considered over at the 10 or 15 minute mark, based on, right, we machine learn every patch from scratch and say, hey, based on all the games, let's machine learn what a team's chance of winning is. And so even though we didn't change gold income, we didn't change any champion kits, the fact that items are weaker means the machine learning understands that, oh, gold leads don't determine wins as much. In fact, you probably can't get kills off your leads quickly, so it even reinforces itself. And then, hey, games are less snowballed, even if gold leads might be the same or they're a little bit less. Regardless, the game is down in snowballing. We also, I didn't actually write this, but it's also one of the topics, is combat pacing. Combat pacing is slower across the board. That is a good thing. What is not great is that even though we basically didn't cut haste at all from assassins, AD assassins are the worst, are one of the most hit classes of champions in terms of how much longer their kills take. So that is obviously not great. That was not a desirable goal. I'm so happy that we nerfed items as opposed to giving everyone an extra 15 armor, because that would have hit assassins really hard as well. But we are aware that AD assassins specifically are in a worse spot right now, and so we need to do some work to make sure that they're going to be okay, and that we can make them do the right things. Now, this can be a very, very involved thing, right? There's an easy version, for example, which is we're just going to cut 20 armor of every champion in the game, and that will disproportionately affect AD assassins. I think that is a viable option, to be clear, especially if you take it away as an XP factor. If you take it away mostly from champion stat growth, right? Then you would slightly lower snowballing. You would generally have assassins, right? AD assassins do better overall, but you would also make champions squish your late game, right? You would undo some of the gains of slower combat pacing, and so this is where things get tough, right? Is almost no matter what you do, you're going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Of course, you can also make mistakes and have many steps back or more, but no matter what you do, you're going to have some steps forward and some steps back. Hey, we're really happy. Game times are fine. Lowering snowballing is a good thing. Slowing down combat is a good thing. Unfortunately, our step back was, well, AD assassins kind of suck right now. Also, crit ADCs also kind of suck right now. Both those are undesirable. We don't want either of those classes to suck. They currently do, so we need to fix that. We have some buffs going into this patch. We have some item changes going into this patch. Not a ton, but we are working toward it. And at the end of the day, it's I think Riven was one of the most hit AD champions overall, but even Zed is just yeah, he's down about 1%. 1% is not end of the world kind of thing. Again, we should make sure these champions are good, right? But the degree to which champions have been hit, those who are already maybe borderline, not extreme. But again, we are always going to keep up and rebalance things as needed. And so just note that we are aware that right now crit ADCs as well as AD assassins are the most hurt classes right now, and so we're going to try to rectify that in the coming patches, of course. Not much more to say here. Let's move forward. Also, generally speaking, the best classes, tanks really, really good, especially tanks who AP juggernaut itemization. I mean, people are increasingly understanding that Unending Despair is an amazingly strong item. It was intentional that, Merc Treads were nerfed and Steel Caps were buffed. It was very intentional that playing a triple AP team comp was not hard griefing. Like, I did all the design changes to Abyssal Mask and making it a percent pen item. Yes, it gives your whole team Void Staff. Okay, well, great. You had to be playing triple AP to do that, and it's been trash for a really long time, so, like, there are going to be very meaningful solo queue win rate impacts on, oh, it's not going to play two mages anymore? Oh, mage win rates go up because they were with two mages sometimes, right? Like, those are going to be expected results of the systems are in a better place. Now let's go retune the champions. Like, this will always be true. This will always be the case. I am personally happy with the access to MR that exists in League of Legends right now. Now, that might mean that with this current, like, fairly restricted access to MR, or the amount of bonus health in armor items, which, functionally makes you also really strong against magic damage, that we have given too high of AP ratios or base damage, or maybe, like, literally armor to magic damage champions. And over time, we will have to work those things back. And depending on which designer is tasked with, like, go rectify the AD assassin problem or something else, like, different tactics will be chosen here. But generally speaking, AP champions and tanky champions are the winners. This is unsurprising. Tank items were the least nerfed, and MR was specifically nerfed more than armor was. It is not a surprise to see those be the results here. Just, again, we will have to unwind to make sure the champion balance is in a good spot, because as far as I'm concerned, these systems are close to where they should be now. That said, going forward, we did our sprint planning for patch 14.21 right now. I'm not going to be talking about everything that everyone's doing. In fact, not everything we're working on is going into the next patch anyway. But right now, we are planning on putting our bounties work in for 14.21. The champion bounties went to the PBE last week. I just submitted changes to objective bounties in today, so those are going to go to the PBE as well. It's all in scripting, so it's not really possible to data scrape. But we are going to be having some bounty changes. Those will generally lower gold income in the game, and they will lower snowballing some as a result, and they will also lower comebacks as a result. Again, the primary vector is in all cases there is less gold in the game, but basically if you get a lead, you're going to throw away less gold. So if you are, for example, an early game champion killer, maybe an assassin, you're going to give away less gold to the Jinx late game when you invariably die for one mistake. Right, there are some fairly meaningful systemic knock-on effects when you change a system like bounties. We'll see. There might be some tuning iterations, of course, in the next 2 weeks, but we are systemically changing the game in a subtle but meaningful way in 0.21. We are still digging into which items are going to need more directional work here. Making sure Yuntal feels like a good first slot AD carry item. I said it when I did the patch preview a month or so ago. I think we wrote it into the patch notes as well, like literally the 14.19 patch notes. I think we might be even writing it in, I don't think we're writing it in the 0.20 patch notes, but it's like Yuntal probably should exist because it was first made as a, like, AD crit second capstone. And we were like, we don't want a second AD crit capstone. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to retool it then as an AD crit non-caster first slot item, right? Because we have Collector, we have ER. Those are both spell-based, like Lethality is a spell multiplier, and Ability Haste and Mana Refunds are spell multipliers, and that's fine. I don't mind that there's two, like, distinct versions of spell multiplying AD crit items, but we need the, like, Zeri Jinx, all I do is right-click you. We need that item. And Yuntal skilling its on-hit effect on crit is not great, and I know that. But this is the reason we have the Yuntal as right now is because we didn't scope a bunch of item reworks into that project. Like, just, like, getting them all transcribed and, like, getting a decent look at how efficient everything was and putting everything into a spreadsheet together ready to go, and, like, manipulating the things that I wanted to so I could, like, easily make changes in the future and have them reflect sort of, like, across the whole system. That took, like, a week just to put them all down. And it was retuning everything, which took several more days and then lots of testing, right? So it's like adding on, okay, now that I've got everything there, let's go remake this item, remake that item, remake that item. It's like, let's just go, and then we understand there's cleanup. And so, right, there's Yuntal making sense as a first slot AD crit auto-attack item. Work to be done there. Work to make sure that Kraken Slayer and Blade of the Rune King feel good as distinct, bespoke, like, slot one, very offense-driven on-hit items. Work to do there for sure, right? I mean, Kraken Slayer lost his crit chance recently, right? And so, yeah, finding its correct place in the system, that's not just every crit AD carry buys it because it's better than all the other crit AD carry items. Yeah, it needs a different spot, right? And these things take time, but they're worth doing, and the work that we're doing, and it's the work that we're doing basically next, right? So it is identifying what items need to be where. Are there still any other item balance outliers that weren't tuned properly in the point 19 patch? There's a couple, right? We're doing some of that in this patch as well. We'll talk about it in a little bit. And of course, just generally more champion tuning. There's definitely still several balance outliers that are not in a good spot. And, you know, I mean, every patch, of course, has champion balance, but yes, there's going to be more champion tuning to do. Okay, let's talk about what's going into this patch, though. This patch here in 14.20, we are retuning a bunch, and I mentioned it in the previous one, but yeah, in the future, we're going to be looking at the relative power of Blade the Rune King versus Kraken Slayer and make sure they're in a good spot overall. Okay, so AD carry items. Basically, this is a look at first slot ADC items and trying to make sure that crit ADCs feel like there is a first slot crit damage item for them. When the point 10 system came out, the goal was, if you're crit AD carry, just go Rush Infinity Edge, just go IE Phantom Dancer, that's your build. Right, like, design at Riot is not a monolith, right? Every human has their own opinions on stuff. I am personally, as are other designers, some other designers of the camp, that we are not huge fans of first item IE. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but it does feel tough trying to build your capstone first slot. Again, to be clear, like, there are defensible reasons to have IE first slot, and that used to be true for a lot of League of Legends time, don't get me wrong. But I'm of the opinion, and other people are of the opinion, that we'd like to try a version where it's not IE first slot, and that, like, system should be in a place where you have a good first slot item that you feel good about. IE can sometimes be slot 2, sometimes Phantom Dancer, sometimes Hurricane, whatever, that's fine. And then IE, LDR, or something could be on slot 3, and that would make, you know, be reasonable. I think we have just about the right wealth of on-hit items for being an on-hit champion. Generally speaking, Kraken Slayer versus Blade of the Rune King is pretty good for that. Again, the tuning's a little bit off, but, like, we're not very far from that being pretty solid for first slot choice on hit space. And they've got, like, really solid item progression. Rage Blade's good, Hurricane's good. What's it called? You can get the other one potentially, but I'm blanking on the name of the item. Holy crap. Light and dark passives. No, Terminus. There we go. Yeah, like, Terminus is a good spot. Like, that system, I think, is pretty reasonable. I think those champions are pretty happy. But this one here is a swing to make sure that the slot 1 space feels supported for crit users. And that overall, like, we're just in a good spot, right? So it is removing BF Sword from slot 1 purchases. I had almost taken BF Sword off of Collector, and then one of the playtesters was like, but I like my BF Sword, so I put it back on. But it meant the Collector was so expensive, it was just slightly worse Infinity Edge, and it's like, why would you buy this? So that was a mistake, right? If I had been able to take a more zoomed out view of, like, here is the entire ADC system, these items make sense. And I kind of did that with fighters. I was like, okay, I know where Trinity Force is living, I know where Hullbreaker's living, I know where Titanic is living. Like, I actually had the space mapping in my head for the fighter system, and I'm actually pretty happy with where I place each fighter item. And I think skirmishers have items, I think divers have items, I think juggernauts have items, and I think tanks can easily opt into the juggernaut space to go deal more damage. Like, Hullbreaker and Titanic are ways for tanks to go say, I'm going to carry this game, I'm going this way, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think the placement of those items is in a pretty good spot. I'm not happy with how I placed all the AD crit items, and so thankfully within 2 weeks we're able to relook at this and say, hey, let's make sure that our 3 slot 1 AD crit items, Essence Reaver, the Collector, and Yuntal Wild Arrows, are all under 3,000 gold, right? Clearly cheaper than Infinity Edge. Pretty much happily in the space of where, you know, between Kraken Slayer and Static Shiv are. And then a light nerf Static Shiv, which is like a little bit overperformant, but not by a ton, but a little bit. And say, here are your wealth of options. You do have a non-crit item in Shiv, a non-crit item in Kraken Slayer. It's still a DAS, it's a pretty good amount of stats. It's mostly about the stats, so they're going to multiply your original crit damage, and you're going to take this one item spike, and it's going to fall off, because you're not going to get crit, but that's okay. It's going to fall off, but if you really want to one item spike, you can do that. It's okay. Your Kaisa, you're weird, you don't crit, but you still want ADAS. Cool, good for you. Your Ashe, you're doing the same thing. That's fine. Like, these are not problems. It's cool that champs have their own unique bindings. I don't have an issue with that. There's basically 3 Shiv users. There's probably still going to be 2 to 3 Shiv users. Not going to break that. Totally fine. Totally reasonable. But trying to make sure that people who are like, well, I'm not a Shiv champion, I guess I have to go Kraken Slayer. It's like, no, you can go build first slot crit and feel good about it. So Essence Reaver is minus 50 gold for minus 5 AD and minus 5 haste. Thing about Essence Reaver is its, like, overall stat efficiency profile is incredibly high. And so somewhat counterintuitively, losing a lot of stats for relatively little gold actually retains that efficiency profile, right? Like imagine you have an item that's 200% gold efficient, and you take away 10 AD and 350 gold. Efficiency goes above 200%. It might be triple or 2.5x whatever. So like for hyper items, you actually have to nerf. If you're making it cheaper, you have to like bring down the output more than you bring down the cost to make sense for an item that is hyper efficient, like ER is. That's just how the math works. So for the collector, it's a more straightforward thing. Collector actually seems to be quite weak. ER actually has users. Some people are griefing. Tristana players are rushing Kraken Slayer. ER is substantially better. This item is very, very good. So ER is basically a flat nerf, but you get your infinite mana online 2 waves sooner, which is a pretty big deal. Collector is, to be fair, it is a buff, but once again, all I can really say is it is a buff to the item. It is about 3 to 4% more item per gold as a result here, but should feel pretty good as a first slot rush. And Yuntal Wild Arrows is somewhat similar to Essence Reaver, right? It's losing a little bit of bleed. I would say 10 bleed here is not as impactful as something like 5 haste, but cheaper, minus 5 AD. This is like pretty happy on rate. Like this is a buff overall. Yuntal's like a 6% more item per item buff here, roughly. It's not quite that much. It's like 4% more item per item. Regardless, Yuntal is going to hopefully feel pretty reasonable and have its like 2 to 3 users of I just want to right click you and build crit every slot. That's who this item is for. Again, I'm not saying the item is perfectly designed. A flat bleed that scales off crit chance is not the right thing for that. Not really. The fact that it scales a hurricane is kind of cool. I like that. I wouldn't mind a hook there, but we'll see. It is not my work to tune Yuntal, at least not right now. If you don't get it done in 21, maybe it'll go to me. I don't know, but this is not going to be my work, but it is worth doing for sure. And then again, Blade of the Kraken Slayer, making sure that they have obvious bespoke places as probably slot 1 on hit items. I'm confident a designer can do that work and do a good job with it. Onto the AP systems. We are finally taking the long-awaited swing at AP jungle damage. These items are meant to be good. They are meant to give a clear speed boost to a class that has often very little utility, and so them being able to clear the jungle quickly is meant to be part of the strength there. But we are finally taking the swing at Faded Ashes and Leander's Torment, and only on the monster side of things. Generally speaking, we think that with Leander's losing 20 ability power next patch, the patch that's already live, the last patch, it losing 20 ability power meant that it was appropriately placed as a PvP item relative to other mage items. Yes, Leander's is very, very common. It's very popular. It's obviously very, very strong, and it basically says, oh, if you're playing a Mumu or Zac, buy this to earn more gold. It's just clearly better than Balmy Cinder, right? It's just, and the numbers are just true. Like the numbers in both these items are just clearly better than Balmy Cinder and Sunfire Cape. And it's like, well, we can make these items not clearly just better than Balmy Cinder and Sunfire Cape. And then at least you have a more fair comparison between the two items. That's probably a positive here overall. And so trying to bring that element of it closer to parity. Even the fact that like we're seeing Nidalee like have to rush Leanders to keep her jungle clear going, like that's not great. Yeah, we probably should have done this sooner, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, we are doing it now. Again, we're not bringing this item down by very much anymore. Lilia and Brand and co are not going to lose 2% win rate off of a little bit of jungle damage here. Those champs are all going to be fine, so not a huge concern here. Luden's Tempest is getting, or Luden's Companion as it is getting a slight reshape to its proc output. And isolated target will still take double the damage of a non-isolated target. And that is about the ratio we're comfortable with. That were and largely driven by Froxon, who's like kept pushing his like thumb on the scale, like please keep doing this. We are trying to place a hard limit on how much damage an item can do in a short period of time. And so Luden's Companion's single target burst is going to be, I believe it's 150. I might have it written down somewhere. I'm checking on the other sheet because we have our Luden's. Yeah. So the maximum single target damage is going from 210 plus 14% AP. I know I could have written it down here. I know. To 150 plus 10% AP. So you have an item, it gives you mana, gives you haste, gives you a whole chunk of ability power, gives you some wave clear, and if someone's alone, you get like half a spell for free, right? You get like a free rank 1 spell on top of it. And if you buy Storm Surge on top, Storm Surge's damage is going to be 125 plus 10% AP. So if your build is Luden Storm Surge, it's 275 plus 20% ability power. That AP ratio is low, but those items are giving you AP, they're giving you flat pen. Not both, but like They're giving you, like, the passive says burst someone, the stats say burst someone, and the end result is going to be that someone's, like, post game screen is going to see that one spell did as much damage as proc effects because they bought two of them. I think that's a much more reasonable state than the one spell does as much damage as one proc effect. I got another proc effect that does as much damage as another spell, and like I just think that that ratio is off. And look, if you're in a world where you could literally only ever build one proc item, we said you're not allowed to build Ludens and Storm Surge. There's a world where like those numbers could be higher, but at the end of the day, I don't think we're willing to let you print one spell per item. I think those numbers would be just totally unreasonable, and it would make your champion bound to what you're buying. And it means that it would be a burst mage by always building Ludens, always building Storm Surge, and just being like, well, of course. Of course you get one shot. It doesn't matter what my kit does, you will take this burst of damage. And again, that's not something that I'm personally willing to entertain. I don't think it's reasonable. Of course, it is important that items have compelling passives that feel impactful and that reinforce the use case of the item itself. I think that is a good thing. But there is a certain amount of power that has to be kept in check to make sure that overall gameplay is still upheld. I know that I personally, as a designer, I weight, like, in vague terms, overall game health more than I value or am even able to appreciate and like actually value individual feels of individual components of things. I very much bias and skew towards overall game situations, and I'm actually quite bad at what makes a single champion feel as good as they possibly can. That's just not where my strength lies and where my brain is oriented. And part of the work I've been doing over the last several years is trying to like get better at that skill. It's why I always have some like Rek'Sai or Corki or Swain project in the back of my head, because I want to train up that skill. And we don't ship it until people say it's okay, but like I'm trying to get better at that and make feels do better here and whatnot. But it's just calling it a weakness that I know that I have as a person. Regardless, again, it comes down to a little less burst damage here. Now keep in mind, like compared to 4 months ago, mages have way more flat pen than before. They've still got a crew of high AP, like burst-oriented items that all work, and the amount of MR available in the game is lower than before, straight up. So, just like burst is still there. Yes, globally there is less damage in the game because gold is less valuable overall in the game, but like burst mages are still gonna be able to burst. And if like these items are unpickable and Vex and Syndra can't buy these things and win, then it's maybe 5 AP, it's maybe a little bit of flat pen, it's maybe something else, maybe a little bit of gold cost, whatever. But again, happy to have these champions be able to be bursty, and it's fine. But also, I think it's reasonable if Syndra can be like, actually, you know what? This is a game for going Blackfire Torch Landries, and it should be allowed to be viable, where she should be allowed to switch off because the comp demands it, and it's not a game for Luden Storm Surge, and that should be allowed to be fine, right? And so the relative systems have to be in the right place where it's okay to pivot. Alrighty, miscellaneous systems. So first up, there's a minor runes refactor. There was a, I don't know, let's call it implementation mistake, an oversight, whatever, that went live in point 18 or 19, I don't remember, where you probably saw on your runes panel a bunch of tooltips got really screwed up. So I will peel back the curtain on how our tooltips work, right? So let's say I'm looking at Grasp of the Undying, because it's even getting changed this patch, okay? So Grasp of the Undying right now has about 4 or 5, I think it has 5. You can have more, but Grasp right now has 5 tooltip fields, okay? That's just more, but whatever, okay? So you got a tooltip field for the simple client description, right? When you load up a rune page, when you're like, I want to update my runes, and it's like, here are runes. Like, there's a checkbox for show me complicated tooltips, show me easy tooltips. So there's a tooltip for the easy tooltip of Grasp, and it's like, periodically in combat, hit somebody to deal damage, heal, and gain max health. And it's like, that's one sentence, and I understand what Grasp does. That's a tooltip, right? And that's a file, it's got a key, it's got a string, great. And so if I wanted to make Phase Rush say it was Grasp, I would say, hey, Phase Rush, your short description is Grasp of the Undying. It's like, runes underscore whatever, Grasp of the Undying, right? Okay, Grasp also has a long string. It has a long client tooltip that says Grasp of the Undying every 4 seconds in combat. And it's like, look up the variable for how long the duration is. Every 4 seconds, deal at max health ratio, % of your max health as magic damage, and heal for, at number plus at second ratio, % of your max health, and then gain at max health when you trigger this thing. Line break, this rune is at whatever, effective for ranged champions. And it's like, cool, we can point to all these variables, right? Individual variables. The client can read individual variables. And it's like, great. If you want to read the complex one, you can be like, here's the damage percent. Here's that thing. Here's that thing. Here's that thing. And then, okay, then you have another one that you kind of need, which is, okay, well, now what about the in-game tooltip? Because the in-game tooltip, actually have health. You actually have armor. You have magic resist. You have all these stats. And so we can look at them differently. And so for many runes, at least back in the day, back in 2017 when they were put into the game, either the tech wasn't there, which is entirely possible, or they were under pressure, there wasn't enough time, I don't know what. But most runes in the game now, as of, last week or whatever, would their in-game tooltip, right, here's the next field, it's the in-game tooltip, here's field 3, it says, okay, just paste the complex client tooltip, and then add some more data, which is, here's the math on how much damage 3.5% of your max health is. And here's the math on how much damage 1.2% plus 3 of your max health is. And here's a tracker, because we can go into the script and be like, hey, every time you trigger Grasp of the Undying, I want you to take that max health value, and I want you to add it and store it in a character variable. And then every time, send it back, send it to the game, send it to your client, both in a post-game snapshot, so I know how much max health I gained from Grasp this game, and your current in-game, so that your tooltip can be like, oh, you've gained 77 max HP from Grasp so far this game. And the tooltip's like, yep, find me dynamic variable 1, find me dynamic variable 2, my post-game client, grab dynamic variable 1, grab dynamic variable 2, right? So far, so good, right? Okay, there's another tooltip field, which is what shows up in your runes panel. Now, the runes panel is interesting. The rune panel, if you the place where you have oh, here's my bonus AD, here's my bonus AP, whatever, you the little box down by your portrait, that panel cannot read calculations. It can only read dynamic variable 1, dynamic variable 2, dynamic variable 3. And so I probably give you the pieces to know now why we got where we were, which is most runes a month ago were sharing the same string and key for what's my rune panel. And so there was a giant shared string that just said at F1, line break at F2. And at F1 at and at F2 at are dynamic variable 1, dynamic variable 2. That's how we'd write it in the tooltip, literally. And so someone, for a good-natured reason, was like, oh, I'm going to change Airy or something to show both the damage value and the shield value. So I'm going to, again, human error, right? It's I'm going to go change the rune panel tooltip for Airy to say at F1, line break at F2. And then yep, it did what I wanted. They double check and Airy looks right in game. All right, ship it. And then no one caught via playtesting or whatever that oh, our runes are all borked. Because it meant that every other rune was now showing at F1, at F2. Some champions don't have an at, or some runes don't have an at F2, so it just shows 0 the entire time. And of course, some runes do. So anyway, I realized this, I'm hang on a second. Not only is our tech better from 7 years ago, but also, this looks really bad, we should fix it. So I went in and for, I think, every single rune, or almost every single rune, I might have missed a couple, but I think I got through every rune. I did a couple things. So one is I rewrote their in-game tooltip calculations. Because they were using the old client tooltip and having to say it's 30 to 60 based on champ level. Because again, your client doesn't know what level you are. You're in champ select. You're level 0. It has to show you number 1, number 2, say based on level, whatever. But if you're in game, I don't have to do that. I can just be here's a calculation. It's 30 to 60 based on champ level. But the game knows what level you are. The game knows you're level 7. And so it can just show you 42. And it's just there. And so I went in and I built a calc for every rune that seemed like it would reasonably have a calc in there. And then basically did tooltip finagling to where it will be because here's another one, by the way. So if you hold shift, you get your advanced tooltip for your skills. So if you're playing Syndra and you read Syndra Q, it's cast a spell dealing 83 magic damage. You're cool. If you hold shift, it says, deal 70 plus 70% ability power magic damage. You're oh, okay. Cool. I hold shift and I get more information. That's neat. Great. So for whatever reason, runes can't hold shift. It doesn't work. Don't know why. Whatever. I'm not here to fix that. I literally couldn't. It would be an engineer who'd do that. You can't hold shift for runes. But what you can do, which is cool, is for calcs, you can say if it's a simple tooltip or a complex tooltip, aka you're holding shift, or some other thing that I'm not sure what you'd use it for. Here's how I want you to show the numbers. I could make Syndraq always show you the entire math whether you hold shift or not. I'm not going to. That would be stupid. And most things are just default, which is compressed when you don't hold shift and then split out with the ratios when you do hold shift. duh. But for runes, you have to just like pick one and say it's always this because it's always simple view. And so I basically made every rune who could use a calc have a calc, and then say always show final total plus extrapolated view. So in a week when you load in the game and you like Grasp of the Undying, it will be like deals 73 equals 3.5% max HP magic damage. That would be a lot of max health to do that much damage, but whatever. Anyway, so it's like, oh, cool, that's way easier to use. Wonderful, cool stuff, right? So it was rewriting all the in-game tooltips to use newer tech anyway. It was building calculations to every rune of the game. It was then breaking out their their rune panel tooltip to use their own key and own string per rune, and then ensuring that the numbers we're forcing into those, the F1s and F2s, are the best ones. Now, you may disagree with some of my choices here, and that is fine. It is very easy to change. That is not a problem. In particular, one rune that I changed here is Demolish. So on live before it was messed up a month ago, Demolish just tracked how much total damage droids Demolish did, right? So it'd show 800, 1600, whatever. Totally reasonable to track. However, Demolish currently does not have a debuff that it uses to track if Demolish is ready or not. It simply has a timer. It ticks down in script. And the designer who built Demolish way back when was clever enough to say, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Demolish tooltip. I'm going to have that timer shove itself into the dynamic variable, one of the dynamic variables for Demolish, every second. So on live right now, if you hover over your Demolish tooltip, it'll be like, cooldown remaining 30 seconds. And you hover off and go back, it'll be like, cooldown remaining 30 seconds. You hover, go back, cooldown remaining 28 seconds. That is really cumbersome. And I did not scope in adding a debuff, a debuff tracker to this rune. It would actually require a meaningful rescript because I guess a debuff is not how it's tracking its cooldown, right? So I just that wasn't budgeted in for this, so I didn't do it. We could, but anyway, what Demolish does instead now is, on the left side of line break, it is ticking down the cooldown. On the right side is number of procs. I know number of procs is not as exciting as seeing 1200 damage out the turrets. I'm well aware. But the panel is not large enough for a 2-digit countdown and a 4-digit damage number. It cannot fit without overlapping over area or whatever you're running. So it's have a countdown on your runes panel that you can easily access and note show total damage, or only show total damage and make you hover Demolish. I made the choice to show countdown plus count. If you feel vehemently against that, it is not that hard to rebuild. It just is work that has to be spent that's not doing something else, right? And so let me know, right? But hey, there's my Demolish story. And again, went through and rebuilt a lot of runes. And there's some, by the way, that didn't. Yeah, so Water Walking is now much better about this, and just there's a lot of cleanup here. And what's cool about the final thing about the runes tooltip display here is the in-game rune tooltip display is used equally by you and your opponents, because anyone can go and hover over anyone's keystone and read what it does. And so being a bit more concise there and getting a bit more information there can help people oh, it's a little bit easier to know what Grasp is doing and what Grasp has done. It made just some of the language a little bit easier to understand and read and everything else. There's a couple other ones I made all of the Hunter runes have a more consistent tooltip format. They all tracked 5 out of 5, but there were some random things that oh, this is just this can be better. This could track different data and be more valuable. So there's a couple of post green screen updates. There's a couple of in-game updates, but anyway, yeah. So I spent about 2.5 days on that. I think it was valuable, especially because the tooltips were actually ugly in game, and so it's gonna be better now. Otherwise, though, we have just generic balance changes here. The initial impetus for the Thornmail nerf was, hey, we're not gonna nerf everyone's armor by 15 out of nowhere, so why don't we nerf the most common armor items, especially ones that are too good? So I didn't think steel caps should be nerfed. I think that item is appropriate as it stands right now. We should tune items around the fact that steel caps is this, tune champions around it. Totally fine to do that. But ultimately, Thornmail is the most common and arguably most overperformant armor item right now. I think Unending Despair is horribly slept on, but it has such a little pick rate that we wouldn't get any systemic gains off of nerfing it. I'm intentionally leaving that item probably too strong because players just don't realize that item is amazing. It is the best generic teamfight armor item. It's not close. That item is great. I think eventually players will realize that, and then we'll have to retune it. But again, there's no gain to nerfing an item with a 3% pick rate right now because it's not in the games enough. But a Thornmail nerf, minus armor, minus late game damage. Okay, great. By the way, this is like still more Thorns damage than it was before the Mythic item update. So like, pretty sure this item's fine. Grasp of the Undying is getting over poached by non-tanks. Also, tanks doing so well right now that we just have room to nerf Grasp, and it's fine. Grasp's heal is being nerfed until 3,000 max HP. A little bit easier for a tank to reach, of course. And also nerfing the bonus health gained from Grasp by 2 for melee users and 1 for range users. Again, tanks will be hurt less by this, but it's basically a big like Yasuo Yone style nerf where like this rune is clearly over if this is what these champions are doing. And we can again always retune champs as needed. It's not a problem. But if Grasp is really eating the fighter space, Grasp is too good relative to other keystones, just like straight up, right? And so it's re-incentivizing the fact that it's for people who are already tanky, not champs who want the sustain and want to get tankier. Otherwise, a simple buff to Nimbus Cloak. The change last patch, which made its move speed decay, ended up being significantly power negative, so bringing up some more of the move speed to make it less the case here. All right, on to the next thing. There's just 2 slides here for individual champion changes. Not much more to say. A lot of these are going to be kind of unsurprising. So Veigar is losing some AP ratio on his W. This is a champion where, unsurprisingly, when everyone is getting less value out of gold, getting power from not gold is a really good thing. So Veigar, Nasus, Aurelion Sol, all champions who gained win rate this patch for a Smolder as well for entirely unsurprising reasons. That said, Veigar we thought was the one most deserving of nerfs right now, though we're still aware that we probably want to look at the other ones down the line. Regardless, Veigar, we're going for a low elo skewed nerf. W is exceptionally low elo skewed of a spell. It is very, very, very unreliable. I could see a world where we want to make changes to Veigar and make him more reliable and do a bunch of stuff here. That is not this. This is not retiming spells and whatnot, whatever. But Veigar W mostly only hits in lower elos, and so if you're high elo Veigar, you're not losing that much here. If you're facing Veigar in your lower elo, odds are you were not as good at dodging, and so this is going to be a disproportionate nerf in those skill brackets. Udyr, simply going for jungle skewed changes here. His top lane is probably a little bit too strong, but not really egregiously so. Also, we are, lightly nerfing some tank outputs like Thornmail, which he will buy sometimes, and Grasp, which he goes very frequently. We also know that he's getting some jungle nerfs via Faded Ashes and Liandry's. Even still, Udyr jungle is substantially over the line. And so doing some monster damage nerfs on his Q and R, and also a generic nerf on the E. This is, I believe, 5 to 10% move speed off the E. That spell gives him a lot of move speed. It's going to get a little less now. We expect this to be jungle skewed as well. His mobility is generally going to be a jungle skewed output. Yeah, I think a pretty reasonable nerf for Udyr, who's pretty substantially over. Skarner. We've actually known Skarner was probably OP for a while. He's been in the game long enough now in his new shape that we have reliable, new mastery data for Skarner. And we knew heading into Worlds that Skarner was the highest win rate tank jungler when mastered. But what we saw from pro leagues right up until the cutoff of playoffs is that Maokai was getting close to 100%. Sejuani was the clear number 2. And Skarner was way down number 3. Even other highly skilled analysts like Kadril was like, oh, I see this patch notes, and I'm like, well, Sejuani's on the way up to number 1. And it's like, nope, Skarner's been this good the whole time. And so we'll see if play-ins matches actual Worlds group stage itself. I'm recording this before day 1 of groups, or I guess Swiss starts here. But my read is that Skarner, I thought Skarner was the best tank jungler in the game. I'm a little surprised it took pros this long to realize it, but it didn't take him that long. I suppose he's been in the game for only 6 months. But they're finally aware. Good, he is this good. And so with a completely clean conscience, we can take his numbers down. The fact that Skarner's solo queue build is pretty juggernauty. He's going Heartsteel into Sterix, missing success. The before I was even attached to the project, they had wanted Skarner to be somewhat tank, somewhat juggernaut. And to be clear, a big part of being a juggernaut is not just bursting the shit out of people. It is meant to be more sustained damage. But cool, he's going Heartsteel into Sterix. Those sound like juggernaut items. Those sound like you're a tank who wants to deal damage. Great. I'm glad we got there. Didn't require that much. The levers were already in place. That's cool. The items are in place. That's great. So a lot of these pieces are working. But it's basically okay, so what we can do here is say that Skarner passive is a meaningful amount of power for very little satisfaction. I would be surprised if any Skarner player really feels the passive damage outside of jungle clear. And by the way, in his jungle clear, he's hitting monster cap anyway, so it doesn't matter. This was I didn't do the changes here, but I suggested to the designer who did these changes, like, hey, I think passive is free real estate for win rate without sapping satisfaction. I think E damage is a pretty good space to go to say, hey, Skarner is not meant to one-shot you. We had loaded this spell to be really, really strong because we were really worried that all Skarner would do in team fights is just backwards E people. And then when we finally come up with a solve for backwards E, we no longer needed to heavily, heavily overload the outputs of E itself. One thing that is true about Skarner is that he has actually got an incredibly, incredibly steep mastery curve because his E is an entirely unique spell, entirely unique skill with a lot of it's like Nunu W, right? Like the considerations of how you play your champion, how you path, and how you view lanes are unique to exactly Skarner, just like Nunu W is unique to exactly Nunu. Nunu, unsurprisingly, also a very, very high mastery champion. He is hard because learning all the snowball angles and to play the game through the eyes of Nunu and play the game through the eyes of Skarner means you have to put reps on just that champion. You can't just like be a good jungler. You have to be a good Skarner, be a good Nunu. And so if we can peel a little bit of power off the E, and like we knew, like before I was even attached to this project, again, we knew that this was going to be a very difficult, like innately elite skewed due to mastery requirements champion. And yeah, so the end result is, hey, we would like to bring down that top level required mastery a little bit. Obviously, E is still a lot of his power budget. It is clearly worth wall slamming. It is a lot of damage. It is a lot of CC. It is a lot of target access. So yeah, these are spots that I thought were reasonable. This E basically doesn't nerf bad Skarner players. This is a champ whose win rates look really low because people are bad at him still. Skarner passive is a place where he has damage that I think is not going to be terribly satisfying, so an easy place to take damage away from, and that's fine. Is Skarner perfect? No. Could I have done a better job with like finishing his design when it was handed to me? Absolutely, I could have. But this champion is powerful, and we'll keep tuning him as needed and see what else he needs, and going on from there. Next up is Singed. Singed is statistically one of the largest beneficiaries in terms of how long it takes champions to die of this patch. Right? Singed, if he can't be bursted, loves laughing when you think you can sustain damage to him when he's running away with Riley's and his R on. Singed has been the biggest winner. Keep in mind, Singed also prints a ton of bonus armor MR through his ultimate. Ultimately, yeah, Singed is just quite OP. He's doing very, very, very well. We're not doing a lot of it here. Again, what consideration we have is like, do we want to lower the amount of armor in the game because of AD Assassin doing so poorly? At the end of the day, this is the only armor nerf we have this patch on a champion level. I don't know, again, what we're going to do about Assassin specifically. It's not my project. But this was like kind of the consideration here. But it's just like a generic nerf to Singed, not much to say. Shyvana is losing some power here. Specifically, I wanted to... So... Shyvana's in an interesting spot here. I think she's very overtuned, and I think she will still be on the strong side next patch. What I'm happy about, though, is it seems like her really, really substantial win rate by MMR skew has gone down over time. That over time, we've peeled back some level scaling off of her and tried to put her power into things where her opponents have agency over the results, and those have... Sorry, the other way around. Give her agency over her outputs a bit more, since high agency tends to be a little bit high elo skewed. And so by giving Shyvana more individual agency, by stripping away power from things that are a little bit unfeelable and tend to affect low elo players more, like trying to flatten out Shyvana some so that like we don't have to keep nerfing Shyvana for silver and have like every Diamond plus Shyvana be really pissed that their champion feels incredibly weak because it's all out of their hands. And so when it's convenient, fixing it up, I think is fairly valuable. It is not required for every champion. There are some champs where it's like they're low elo champs, and there's going to be some champs like they're high elo champs, and like that is fine. I don't immediately view Shyvana as that. Maybe someone else views differently. Regardless, the points here are to nerf Shyvana, slightly nerf AP Shiv more than AD Shiv, acknowledging that even AP Shiv is going Shojin first slot here, and also try to disproportionately nerf her in low elo slightly. So the move speed AP ratio on the W and the burst AP ratio on the R are both going down by about 15% each of what the live number is. I think those are both fairly reasonable. You're not landing R people all that often. W move speed decays in and of itself, but like, hey, intentionally nerfing the AP build a little bit, right? because AP Shyvana is where all the winner's coming from. There are AD Shyvana enjoyers out there. No reason to disproportionately nerf them. They're not causing any problems. Right? Like, try to be targeted, right? Like, if the builds are equally powerful, okay, great. If people want to play AP Shyvana, that's not a problem. But let's not collateral damage AD Shiv too hard if we can help it, right? The other side is this is a lever that I believe to be low elo skewed and is actually flat across all roles. It's simply a flat DPS reduction on the pool summoned by Shyvana R plus E, right? The fireball hits, the fireball has some bonus damage, it explodes, bigger radius, bigger AP ratio, bigger base damage, and then there's a pool on the ground. And generally speaking, dots on the ground are incredibly low elo skewed. This is a mistake I think I made with Corki and removing the package. Corki's package cooldown was incredibly pro skewed. Oh, win a team fight every 5 minutes. That's a pro skewed button. Giant line of fire on the ground that kills you walk into it. Low elo skewed. Strongly so. I, in retrospect, wish we kept some version of package. Like, the really high scope version is like replacing Corki R with package, replacing Valkyrie with Missile Barrage, doing something else, moving buttons around. That actually would have been a probably more bounceable character. Give him like a 2.5 minute cooldown, could be like generically long, shorten the range by 20% or something, so it's not really stupid for roaming around the map. Probably could have been a version of Corki that worked. Again, I have regrets. I try to learn, try to be better next time, every time. I have some regrets. The fact that Corki was at like 43% win rate and getting pro play. I'm pretty sure pros were griefing, don't get me wrong, but also that really sucks. Anyway, ground dots, I believe, are low elo skewed. I think Shyvana players will get no satisfaction out of their ground dot damage. I think they never notice it. It is free win rate that won't really be felt, similar to kind of Starner passive. I think is reasonable. Next one, nerfing Poppy. Finally catching on. We've known Poppy support was really OP for a while, and players just refuse to realize the champ is absolutely shattered. So we're trying to be support skewed. We are okay with some top lane nerfs. Top lane Poppy is a little bit too strong as well. But we'd like to keep Poppy jungle equal to maybe slightly positive from where she is right now. So passive cooldown being increased. We think this is going to be fairly support skewed. Throw Buckler at lane opponent, get free passive proc, get some poke damage, whatever. Right, when Poppy has to like last hit minions, she can't really position cooldown anyway. It's just like generically shield on whatever cooldown, kind of whatever. E damage, flat 10 damage reduction on Poppy E. We think Poppy support and jungle have really high access to wall slams here. We think this affects top lane Poppy not very much, but we think it affects support Poppy pretty meaningfully. It's 10 flat damage, meaning 20 damage on a wall slam, which is quite meaningful for someone who doesn't get to build any bonus attack damage here. And then we're actually increasing, I believe it actually is monster and minion. The damage cap on her Q as a minion, I believe that the cap is shared. This is the damage cap on Q being increased, I think by 20 per explosion. Like the hit and the explosion, right? So that is a fairly meaningful bump to things like wave clear and also for jungle clear overall. So we think it's going to be power positive for jungle, relatively neutral, maybe slightly negative for top lane, and negative for support is the goal here. Next up, nerfing Mordekaiser Q. Of course, he's a big winner of Riley's was not nerfed very heavily. That was fairly intentional. He lost some ability power on Leandries, but just having the burn was, of course, a big deal for him anyway. He was fine with all the other stats. Like, he uses the health. He uses everything else. He uses the percent more damage. Like, that actually works well with his kit. So, 20 flat AP nerfs it for Mordekaiser less than it does for other champions, like maybe Syndra. But Mordekaiser ends up being a big winner. And so, hey, Mordekaiser, a couple of considerations here, right? One, Mordekaiser is a Juggernaut, not a burst mage. He does not need to be able to two-shot you in a combo. On the other side, Mordekaiser needs to have the appropriate amount of gameplay and counterplay, right? If Mordekaiser, like, passive turned on the second he gets in champion combat, and he's like, oh, I ult you, walk at you, and you die to just Leandry's passive burn, Mord would have no gameplay, because, like, he's not even kiteable like a regular Juggernaut would be. So there does need to be some amount of power in Mordekaiser Q and Mordekaiser E for not only setting up his passive, but dealing a portion of their damage. That said, the ratio of damage coming from his Q, probably not quite accurate, right? So the end result is we are bringing down Mordekaiser Q damage some. Generally speaking, Mordekaiser's spells are low elo skewed, and his passive and autoing people is high elo skewed because more skilled players can dodge Mordekaiser's individual spells. And so, again, the duality here matters, which is there needs to be enough gameplay around playing around Mordekaiser. And that probably ends up manifesting in that he will always be a little bit low elo skewed. But until he becomes high elo skewed, we probably have a decent amount of room to bring down the things that have counterplay, essentially not hurting his reliability at all, nerfing his win rate, but nerfing it disproportionately in lower elos. I think for now, in the current tuning of Mordekaiser, that is all reasonable. There is a point where it goes too far. I do not think we are there. Next up is Jhin. Jhin has been absolutely incredibly strong for a very long time. We are buffing one of his core items. We're buffing Collector next patch. He is likely to move over to it entirely and feel very good about that one. We are nerfing Jin's attack damage growth from 4.7 to 4.4. We are nerfing the rank 2 and 3 R base damage down to the second lowest they've ever been. I actually went back and looked at Jin's entire patch history, and his Q has the highest gold skins he's ever had. His W has basically never been touched damage-wise. It's been touched like once total in history. His E, whatever, doesn't deal damage anyway. Who cares? It never hits anyone. But the big thing is his ult has been given a lot of power over time. When Jhin launched, it dealt triple damage. Now it does quadruple damage if you're low enough. When every AD carry went from 2.0 to 1.75 crit damage, Jin's R did not get down to 1.75. The AD ratio has only increased with time. It launched at 0.2, now it's at 0.25. That's not very big, don't get me wrong. But it's a total AD ratio, so it actually increases base damage as well. And the overall base damage of R is also higher than it has basically ever been. This nerf puts it the second highest. I'm the one who put it at the first highest. But it's been a long line of Jhin R getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. Some of that I think is desirable, right? Having strong ultimates tends to be pro skewed. I mean, we got to the point where we got Jhin in pro again, which I think is a good thing. It does really good things for variety overall. It might be that we're not meant to nerf R quite so much, whatever. Again, this is still one of the strongest points Jhin R has ever been. Outside of the slow, that one got nerfed. But I did the changes here. I didn't want to nerf Q because I felt like there was a decent amount of Q muscle memory built up, and I was like, at this cadence, I don't want to mess with it right now. We may still go after some of his gold scaling. I mean, overall, what I kind of want to point out here, just as a general idea, is like, I like that Jhin is uniquely a very fun, very satisfying, very gratifying utility bot laner. We have very, very few of those. And so, in general, I really, really do not want to lower any of Jin's utility, absolutely ever. And in fact, I generally want to make him less gold reliant a little bit over time, because that way he gets to be a weak side AD carry. It's like, oh, I'm autofilled or something, and this is my one champion that I learned, and don't worry, I'll be fine. Or, you know, we just want to play for top side, so here's Jhin. You saw it in the utility ADC who doesn't need to get funneled a bunch of gold to do his job. Like, all those things help him stand out and be more unique in the roster, which are all good things. Yes, it's a base damage nerf, sure, but it is a damage nerf specifically, and late game damage nerf specifically, so that he can stand more apart from other champions in late game carry threat. Dr. Mundo, we've used this level before. End of the day, Mundo has a lot of health. Everyone else lost a lot of damage, especially fighters. The Juggernauts and fighters lost raw AD. Mundo gets to also lose raw AD here. I think it's very, very safe, very reasonable. This could be about 1.5% win rate of attack damage once you start ranking E. But levels 1 through 7, no change. Okay. Champion buffs. Phelios, again, we are buffing Collector this patch. So he's going to get some win rate from that, probably under 0.5%. But we're giving him around 1 and change percent win rate of base AP and bonus attack damage via his Q rank up, via his passive. So it's pretty simple stuff. Honestly, retuning of Phelios spells is just, it's more arduous because, like, they're not that hard to find. It's just that he has so many of them that, like, there's a lot of things to retune, and it, like, requires extra effort to know, like, oh, yeah, these are his best guns, so do we want to make them more of his best guns? Do we want to bring up the worst ones? Do we want to, and it's just like, it is always a bit more arduous to affect Aphelios' spells. Now, that said, the last, like, 4 sets of changes with Aphelios, I think we mostly affect his abilities, as, like, I get help from people who, like, know Aphelios very well, and they're like, here's the rundown, here's the abilities that are good, here's the ones that are bad, like, here's the things that feel frustrating to play against him, and so, you know, occasionally we get those, but, like, it just takes more effort to do those, so it's very easy to do base stats. Next up, the Caitlyn. Caitlyn's AS ratio is all the way back up to 0.65. I did the last two buffs here, I've done the third one. I put Caitlyn's AS ratio back on 65. This is a champion with no AS steroids anywhere. She will still be a sniper who attacks slower than other champions because she has no AS ratio, but continue to bring up the value of Phantom Dancer or RFC and Zerk Greaves and Lethal Tempo because they're all traps basically on her right now, and she has to build pure AD lethality because AS is not a real stat. I don't like that. This makes AS a bit more of a real stat. If we can ever nerf Caitlyn, I would actually nerf her AS growth because that would then, as a percentage, again, make daggers better on her. So still going that way. But this is going to be, like, pretty low. Like, this is, like, a 0.25% of win rate of AS ratio here. It's not like a very big deal. The bigger one, though, is the secondary damage on Q. The pass-through damage on Q is being increased by 20% from 0.5x to 0.6x. This is meant to be pretty big, and this plus Collector getting buffed is supposed to be pretty valuable for Caitlyn. This should feel pretty comfortable for her. Next is Corki. Corki really sucks. Accounting for mastery, he's nowhere close. This champion is an absolute pile. I know when I was doing the update recently, I was like, man, I would sure love to give him a good aggressive use of W, and I couldn't come up with one because it puts his field on the ground. I was like, oh, what if it slowed? And it's like, oh, I'm going to Valkyrie backwards, and now you're slowed chasing me? It's a better escape tool. Okay, that doesn't work. It's like, what if he, like, sends out an explosion when he lands? Like, well, we don't have art support right now. Like, our particle artists, our VFX artists are, like, actually very busy. Maybe they weren't as much back then, but I'm like, I just, like, wasn't equipped to explore this very well. It's like, I think just getting rid of the pack is going to be good enough. And again, he's in a really bad spot right now, which sucks. We know it sucks. We want to fix this. I'm sorry for screwing it up. But anyway, for now, we get to put an AD ratio on W. This is actually, to be fair, fairly tame right now. This is the total AD ratio over the entire, like, 9-tick lifetime. That is unrealistic. That is not going to happen in any realistic scenario, but it's at least good for wave clear. You are guaranteed at minimum 2 ticks when this happens. It specifically, the buff lasts long enough that you always get them when you start, and you'll always get a second tick even if they flash off the pool. So you will at least always get 1/5 of this spell no matter what, which is not a ton, right? It's only a little bit of bonus AD ratio. Again, I started a little bit soft here. There's a chance that W is wildly better than we give credit for. I don't think that is true, but it's a fairly meaningful damage upgrade. We'll see what it does. It lets them play a bit more daring. Mana cost upgrades, W damage. We'll see what happens. Probably still sucks, though. Lee Sin gets 3 base AD. Not much to say. This champion lost a fair bit. Eclipse is one of the more nerfed items in the game. We are happy with where Eclipse is. It's got the correct number of optimal users as far as we are concerned. So, yeah, happy with that. Plus 3 AD because his best item got nerfed, of course. Pantheon. His best items got nerfed a fair bit as well. Trying to top skew these buffs a little bit. 1% max health damage on his W will tend to be more effective against champions with more max health, which tend to be in top lane. Great. Riven is getting a fairly substantial reshape set of work here. So what's wild is Riven is a very good example of places where there has, in fact, been power creep over the last 14 years or so in League of Legends. Basically, every single one of Riven's numbers is higher than it used to be. Now, there are some very meaningful asterisks right here, okay? 1, champions have way more armor at level 1 than they used to. Now, some of that was they used to be able to run, I mean, there was a version of runes where you had 9 armor in runes. There was a version where you had 14 armor in runes, just from seals. This is not counting the 12 or 13 armor you'd get from Quints if you were a support or an AD carry. So it's like, yeah, everyone's base armor is like 25 to 35 now, and it used to be 9, but that was fake because you got 5 from masteries and 13 from runes. So really, you had 18 plus 9 is, 27, the same armor, right? So some of that's kind of fake, but also some people didn't run armor seals every game. And so, like, Riven used to exist in that world. Maybe she's fighting a Gangplank who went scaling health seals. Well, guess what? Gangplank's got 17 armor, and Riven's damage is going to be really high against that dude. Now, no one gets to run armor seals. And again, I think the decisions around that were all valid. But it's like, okay, well, we're in a different world now where champions are clearly much tankier in the early game. And Riven, who a lot of her initial lifetime as a champion, her power budget was a lot in dominating you in lane. And she would have good matchups and bad matchups, sure, but a lot of her power was dominating you in lane. And over time, her power got shifted more and more and more toward, well, she won't dominate you in lane, but don't worry, as you level up, you get more damage, you get more damage, you get more damage, you'll get your gold scaling, you'll get your level scaling, you get there. But when Riven launched, her passive was almost all gold scaling, her Q was mostly gold scaling, the base damage wasn't, I mean, it was fine. It wasn't really even that bad, but it was still a lot in gold scaling. And then over time, she got shifted. Riven passive basically has much, much stronger level scaling, and the functional bonus stack damage ratio scales to champ level. It's percent total AD that level scales now. Riven Q has moved up to total AD scaling as well, so level 9 is at the power spike. It's level 18 when she has, all the rest of the base. That's not actually true. Her AD ratio is still capped at 9, so it's still the power spike, but she's been shifted over time. And a lot of that, and I wasn't here for most of this, but a lot of that I would surmise was, let's keep her equally powerful, but let's do it in a way where she's not dominating you in lane anymore. And for, I think, fairly noble goals of, wow, Riven, like I can totally envision, right? Like let's pretend we're in 2015 right now, and it's like, wow, Hooney's running over players. Riven, in the hands of the best players, is incredibly strong, probably overpowered, and she has a 45% win rate in bronze. And for many people, like, have you seen current Cassante? I guess today is different because Cassante just got reworked, but like Cassante from 3 weeks ago has a 45% win rate in solo queue. He's really good in pro play, and to be fair, I think the Cassante issues of 14.18 are different from the Riven issues of 5.18. But like, as much as I'm going to, sort of straw man here a little bit, as much as players love to ignore win rates and say win rates don't matter, my champ sucks anyway, they will happily be like, look at this win rate, this champ is dog shit. And it's like, no, they're hard and you're bad. And I mean, Riven in 2015 was absolutely that. Cassante is absolutely this. Cassante, I'm pretty sure, is shattered right now. His win rate is the same as it was 2 patches ago. I'm pretty sure champ is incredibly broken. But people are bad at him. And what's nice is I have the data to say, well, only show me mastery level 20 Rivens. And it's like, yep, that champ is really strong. Like, show me mastery level 20 Ivory. Yep, this champ is overpowered. Show me mastery 20 Cassante. Oh yeah, the champ is slightly too strong, but he's so high agency, he's definitely overpowered. Show me mastery 20 Zeri. Yep, OP. Mastery 20 Aurelion Soul. Very overpowered. Mastery 20 Smolder. Like, even like right before the Giga nerfs to Smolder for Worlds patch, Mastery 20 Smolder, one of the best AD carries in the game. But that champ is a year old, somewhat canonically, but also literally in game. And players are bad at him. Like, this just is constantly true. And so anyway, champs that are hard tend to be high elo skewed because challenger players play more games than bronze players do. And so the average challenger player has more games on Cassante, more games on Riven, more games on Hui, more games on Aurelion Soul, etc., 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 than bronze players do. And so you tend to see these very large winner disparities. And the tough thing is, some amount of coddling players needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, if you can't have any fun on your first game, that kind of sucks. Unless you are like, actually know you're signing up for the, but if I can master them, I'll get there, mastery curve. But sometimes it just feels very inapproachable. Sometimes we're like, that's what it is, we're going to do it, that's fine. Sometimes it's not. Anyway, I can totally imagine for noble goals, Riven was shifted and shifted and shifted to be like, well, if low elo players aren't good enough at Riven, we'll just make her kit natively good in lower elo, making her weaker in lane and better with champion levels, because we know laning phase doesn't matter as much in bronze, and level 18 happens way more often there. And Riven's win rate by MMR, when you just like blindly measure win rates, is a lot flatter than it used to be 10 years ago. That is undeniably true. However, 2 things happen from that. One, if we are willing to be like, just get good, we don't have to solve for low MMR win rates, because we can, with a straight face, say, just get good, trust me, put in the practice. And there are some champions where that is a defensible thing to say. The other thing, and this is sort of like the things that cause durability update, right? The amount of damage you have to give a champion at level 18 to give them the same win rate as the amount of damage they had at level 1 is astronomically far apart, right? Of course it is. And so if over time we're like, man, we want to nerf this champion. This champion's, or, this champion's having too much ban rate or something, whatever. It's like, we'll take away some early game, give him some late game. And the amount you take away from the early game, only, like, keep in mind, right? 3 AD is 1% win rate, right? 3 AD is 1% win rate. That's not that much damage, right? People do the math and it's like, if 3 AD, like, how much could it really matter? And it's like, yeah, it means 1% win rate. Do you know how much ult damage at rank 3 you have to give to bump them by 1% win rate? A lot. It's way more than 3 damage, right? And it's like, but if we do that over time and we're like, let's reshape towards late, let's reshape towards late, let's reshape towards late, you get more and more and more and more and more explosive late game combat pacing. Part of the things where I'm like, hey, can we unwind some of this? I am personally a very big AD and AP ratio on ult hater. I think for some classic, it totally makes sense. Zed has nothing but gold scaling on his ultimate. He has functionally no base damage in that. I don't have a problem with that. He's an assassin. The entire class is predicated on snowballing with gold. I care more about, like, I don't know, generic champion who's just like meant to be pretty good and not a like a really strong gold scaling class like an assassin or a skirmisher or like an AD carry. And it's like, but actually, you've got extremely high gold scaling here. So if you get enough gold, you'll start one-shotting people, even though your class is not about one-shotting people. And I'm not like singling any champion out here, but it's like that can happen. Or like, here's a bunch of level scaling ults. Like ults are so rare. And to be fair, I've been in the camp before as well. It's like ults are so rare that the amount of win rate gain you get from changing ultimates is incredibly small. But every fight that it's up, you feel how much you get one shot. So all these things, as I meander around the point, is we are reshaping Riven's damage profile. Okay, if you buy literally no attack damage, Riven Q is weaker at level 1 and 2 and 3. Then you hit rank 2 and it's fine. And it's weaker at level like 15, 16, 17, 18. Roughly around there. So technically the base damage is lower at various points in time. What that means is the base damage is way higher at champ level 9, right? And so Riven's power curve, right? If this is the old one, it starts a little bit lower, gets quite a bit higher, and then gets a little bit lower by the end. Except that the AD ratio is also buffed. Now the math still works out for the average Riven build as it's a early to mid game buff and then less of a buff late game. But Riven lost a lot of power, especially early on, with Eclipse's power spike being nerfed, right? Absolutely the case here. She is getting less raw AD. She really liked getting that much raw AD. She lost a lot of power because all she wanted was a bunch of longswords. And a lot of her items lost longswords. Now, I tried to put Cerulda's in a spot where she would be comfortable buying it. I tried to make sure that Ma and Death's Dance had enough longswords in them, enough damage in them, that she would feel comfortable buying them. I think there is a chance that Riven builds are a little bit inefficient, and they're missing out on these really, really AD-heavy items. Like, they're going Cleaver instead of Cerulda's, and maybe Cerulda sucks. Maybe Cerulda needs to be buffed. That might be true, right? Like, there might be some outlier items here that are still not where they're supposed to be, but the hope here is to be like, go buy longswords. Longswords are even better on you. Try to push in that direction. And so this gives Riven better gold scaling, less level scaling, and an earlier power spike. And is overall, as long as you are buying items remotely on pace, simply win rate positive, strictly power positive at all points in time. But the places that power is positive is like levels 5 through 9, most pronounced. That is where most of that power is concentrated. Next, we go to Tryndamere. So Tryndamere is what I consider, I mean, he literally is an old champion. What I mean by that is there's kind of a lot to unpack here, and some of this might actually be wrong, but I think back to like 2011 Tristana. She had gold scaling on literally nothing. The champion existed to supply Infinity Edge and Phantom Nectar stats to enemy champions' faces. She had Q for attack speed, but W, E, and R had base damages and no gold scaling. In fact, E and R used to not scale off her attack range either, so like she was often like not in range to cast them while playing League of Legends. Like all she did was turn on rapid fire and right click you, and that was the entire kit. That was old AD carries. And Tryndamere is an old AD carry. Like old Master Yi. His Q had an AP ratio, Meditate had an AP ratio, and then he had Wuju style, and Highlander, which has said deal more damage and attack more quickly. And it's like, all I do is right click you really hard, and that's it. And then my spells kind of exist. Those were all the old carries. And I think for those champions to exist, we would have to go back to like astronomically overpowered Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, and whatnot. Like we would have to be in a spot where like we didn't have role agency metrics back then, but I am pretty sure like the best team comps were actually just play 4 AD carries every game and play a tank in the jungle. Like, go play Tristana in mid, go play Corki in bot lane. Actually, probably vice versa there. Corki was a good mid laner back then. I thought of it like Ashe was a good mid laner. Ashe! She can't survive ganks. She was a good mid laner. I played her. I was rank 1 back in beta. Ashe was a good mid laner. She was one of the best mid laners. How the hell is she supposed to mid lane? She's Ashe. She didn't have Hawkshot. She couldn't find junglers. But like that's how absolutely dumb AD carry items were way back in the day. I'm like pretty confident there was some wild stuff going on that just like people didn't have win rate data, so they didn't know. That's my belief anyway. But realistically, we're in modern League of Legends where we want your spells to matter. Unfortunately, Tryndamere W is basically not a spell. I think Tryndamere Q is in kind of a rough spot. I think Tryndamere E is fine. And it kind of delivers them into range. But like as champions have more and more sort of advanced kits where all their buttons do things, What's also funny, actually, here's another measuring stick for Tryndamere, is um, Tryndamere, a lot of Tryndamere says, like, can I kill someone full to dead in 5 seconds? He's going to trade his health bar down, press R, and if combat pacing is such that someone can die in 5 seconds, Tryndamere is a champion. If combat pacing is such that Tryndamere cannot kill someone in 5 seconds, Tryndamere is no longer a champion, unless Tryndamere has a combat loop outside of his ultimate. But of course, most of the damage from Q passive is only when you're low HP. It's like 3 to 1. It's like, I can gain 5 or 20 damage at level 1. Obviously, like, the Rage passive takes time to build up. Okay, whatever, that's fine. That one's, I think, less of a concern. Him building up Rage is actually good for combat variance. But W doesn't do anything. E is fine, I guess. It, like, exists. It's okay, but it doesn't do enough damage to kill anyone. And so it's like, well, your champion is really flat, right? Can you kill them in 5 seconds? Yes, no. Good luck. I think there's substantial work to be done to make Tryndamere a more functional champion, make him a more functional skirmisher, right? Bel'Veth is not, if I can kill you during E, I win, otherwise I'm not a champion. Bel'Veth is a skirmisher and is a real champion. Viego is a skirmisher and is a real champion. Tryndamere just, like, can't kill you in 5 seconds because, like, contrary to popular opinion, League actually is not substantially more lethal than it was back in 2015 or whatever. It's just not. Our items are a bit more efficient, though that's been walked back some. But, like, we managed to, like, revive a build for Season 2 and Season 4, and it's like, no, dude. The stuff you would do in 2012 and 2014 was comical related to today. Like, I'm sorry, if you think League is more lethal now than a decade ago, you are just wrong. Like, the numbers do not support you. The gameplay does not support you. It might be rose-colored glasses, but, like, it's just not true. It's just not true. This is not to say that we can't make combat slower and more methodical while still maintaining that assassins can assassinate people and be, very, very, seat of your pants, skin of your teeth kind of thing. But no, this is just not true overall. It just isn't. Anyway, all this to say that Tryndamere, right now his kit says kill you in 5 seconds. I'm trying to make this a little bit less required. So Tryndamere, I don't think should be playing Rocket Tag. It's not one shot or be one shot, and so I'm trying to give him more sustained measures. So it's some armor growth. Yeah, it's a pretty boring lever, but hey, here's some durability. One thing that is true right now about Tryndamere is that he is an early game champion because late game is non-functional. He doesn't have the tools to exist and play well late game. Some of that is his third rank up is useless. Some of that is right-clicking people at 32 minutes is really, really hard. And it's really hard to be melee when, you're just melee. You're just kind of squishy, actually. So armor growth helps that a little bit. AS ratio says that his sustained damage is up more, but this champion needs to do something, right? And it's not make his R last longer. We can't give him, like, more crowd control without, like, redoing his kit somehow. So we can upgrade his sustained damage. We can upgrade his sustained durability. Those are the only two things this champion really has without doing significant kit work. Now, I think, again, kit work would be valuable here. We just don't have it. So these are the buffs here to Tryndamere. I know not the most exciting thing ever, but those are the changes. Finally, on to Yasuo and Yone. Basically, so I actually went back and looked at patch history for Yasuo. Yasuo shipped with 10% less crit damage. It actually might have been a little bit higher than that. I don't remember exactly, but he shipped with you have less crit damage, the passive, but you roughly double the value of crit items. He then shipped with a different, even lower crit chance ratio on the on the AD portion, the scaling AD portion of his Q. That was back when people's crit damage was 200%. And so 20% less of 200% crit damage was 160. And so his Q would crit for 160% total AD and then hit flat damage on top. Then everyone's crit damage got nerfed to 175. And Yasuo, of course, inherited that 175, but that 175 was now times 0.8 because he inherited it. And then Yone was created, he just copied Yasuo, which is totally fine. But really, Yasuo was made with his Q having a 1.6 crit damage ratio. And I had for a while been waiting for, like, hey, next time I have room to buff Yasuo, I'd like to bring his Q back to 1.6 crit ratio because it was fine back then. This champion being able to, like, try to go like BF Sword Phantom Dancer or whatever, I think is a very reasonable build for him. Like, let's stop punishing him for building crit. And we can even go harder. We can go, like, higher than he's ever been before by being like, actually, you can crit the base damage as well. Go rush a Phantom Dancer and your Q is going to, like, really truck people. You might have to like retune the base damage or something to like make that the case, but like whatever, we can solve that. But getting into a world where Yasuo is like happy to go pickaxe Phantom Dancer Zergreaves, and Yone as well, I think would be totally reasonable. But it means giving enough damage that he feels good about those. And this is the tough thing, right? Is like I find it very easy to get colored by community perception. And to be fair, like not even just like social media posts, but we actually survey our players as well, and we're like, hey, does combat pacing feel too fast, or does combat pacing feel too slow? And they tend to say too fast. Does the game feel too snowbally, or are comebacks too easy? And they tend to say this too snowbally. Which is why, by the way, we're doing various changes, like things like bounties as well, to like lower some of the snowballing. And why we did these changes at 0.19 to like make the game less snowbally as well, right? Like there's good reason behind this, but like one tough thing is if we're like, okay, if combat pacing is too fast, everyone should deal less damage. When the right answer really should be, no, Yasuo and Yone should be squishy high damage champions, and they're going to kill you or die in 4.5 seconds. And Tryndamere needs to be highly lethal, and Zed and Riven need to be highly lethal, and, you know, so-and-so maybe should be, shouldn't be, whatever, right? But you have to take care to be like, okay, but our tanks are not going to kill you this fast, or that like Landry seems to be like a big enough sacrifice in clear speed or something else, whatever, that Amumu and Zac just don't default every single game. I clearly buy this option. It's fine if it's what's most fun, and you know it's not like actually better than Sunfire Cape, but they build it because they just like building ability power. Like players will do that no matter what. That's going to happen regardless. But being like, no, Dr. Mundo and Cho'Gath and Sion and Shen and Ornn are good champions, and they are strong because they are very tanky, not because they one-shot you, and they are tanks, and they are tanky, and when they're in the game, combat is slower, and when it does not two-shot you off of E, you know, auto E, right? That is, generally speaking, I think, the way in which we get the combat pacing we want, and we preserve that, like, yeah, Zed plays Rocket Tag with you, and Riven, if you're a squishy, probably also plays Rocket Tag with you, but like Tryndamere never does. Pantheon maybe never does. You know, Yone needs to land everything for that to be the case here, but if he does, then yeah, he's gonna combo you. But like, to be more considerate around exactly when that happens, I think, right, that means really digging into exactly which champ needs what, but is currently my thought process on comp pacing. But again, I want to reiterate that like, I don't think the game has actually gotten faster combat on average. Like, not really. At least, like, not in, like, most, like, individual champion bespoke cases. I know I'm, like, really circling these points a lot here, but I've really been, like, deep in the minds, like, let me think about combat pacing and champion roles and who's doing what and whatever. And, like, again, I don't think we are perfect here. I really don't. But I think, like, letting Yasuo and Yone deal more damage, letting Tryndamere deal more damage, be more lethal, like, those are correct, even if it would be cool if League had even slower combat pacing now than it has before. Alrighty. Other change here is for Yasuo. He is the armor pen part of his R, where when he crits, after he hits R, he gets percent bonus armor shred, or bonus armor pen, only on crits. That number is going up, so critless Yasuo gains no extra damage here. Also, I would generally say Yasuo and Yone are first and foremost skirmishers. They are defined by being target agnostic and being relatively squishy. That said, they are still a melee class, and they are not assassins, which means they're probably still top half in net durability. Right, Yasuo, Yone, Tryndamere, Riven, Pantheon, Lee Sin should all be top half of the roster in overall durability. They should also, at least especially in the Yasuo Yone case, be like top 25% in DPS. The downside is low crowd control, having to be melee, and having oftentimes fairly weak target access. Obviously, Yone has quite a bit. Yone becomes a bit more of a diver as a result, right? Him having Vi ulti gives him a lot of reliability, and it means that he can't be quite as lethal as Yasuo is because he just gets there. But like Yasuo, for example, has, and he's had it since the day he launched, a 1.5 bonus AD ratio on his R, which is very high because it requires quite a bit of setup to land that. Either he needs help or he's got to do the cool thing with Q3. And it's like, yeah, some of these, you like load the hell out of the damage scaling on it because that's what's allowed here. Anyway, Yasuo, again, allowed target agnosticism because he is a skirmisher, and skirmishers often have to hit whatever they can hit. And they've got to be able to kill them pretty quickly because they're not very durable to do that themselves. Or they've got like limited windows of doing so with things like Wind Wall. Okay, there is overall the look at the patch. I managed to probably spend 30 minutes yapping on about random stuff. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.